House Committee on Science and Technology. We're here today to have an organizational meeting to get formally constituted as a committee and take up House Bill 126 from Representative Teasley. Before we get started, I would like to recognize somebody that's here today. My legislative assistant, Joseph Johnson, here to my right, has been working hard for me this session. He's also a resource for the committee. So if there's any science and technology related things you need this session, Joseph's at your service. Recent Georgia Tech grad in physics and computer science, and he's been doing yeoman's work for me so far this session. So put him to work. I work him till 5 p.m. You guys have him from 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. any night. So he's at your service. Appreciate members for being here. In everybody's folder, there are 2015-2016 committee rules for the committee. We've not changed the rules at all since last year, but for the sake of new members of the committee, I'll read through them. If there's any questions, we can certainly discuss those, and then we'd be in a posture to entertain a motion that we formally adopt those. So, again, quorum for the committee is 6 members as we get into session. There's a lot of competition for committees. We have appropriations committees going on. Many of us, we have a mix of some pretty senior members here. As we get into appropriations and other hearings, sometimes getting more than 6 is very difficult, so 6 has been our standing quorum. Other than that, they're pretty straightforward as a committee. I do try to give at least 24 hours notice for a hearing, and want to make sure that if there's any questions about scheduling, if there's a member that has a particular interest in being in a hearing that's a scheduling conflict, I will do all I can to try to schedule around particular members if there's an interest. So, having said that, any question about the rules as got a motion? Do I have a second? Hearing second, all in favor of adopting the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you. We are constituted as a committee. Okay. The agenda today is House Bill 126. We were scheduled for next Tuesday to have a meeting. Tuesday from 3 to 5 will be our standing time for the committees. Talking to leadership, I do think, to Representative Dudgeon's surprise, we might have another bill here in the next couple legislative days, so more to follow on that. The aerospace leadership from coastal Georgia had wanted to speak next Tuesday, talk about some of their advances and some things that were I think would be of interest to folks across the state. They're not going to be able to make it, but hold next Tuesday on your calendar. There may be an opportunity to take up some pending legislation. So, having said that, Chair, I'd like to recognize a gentleman from the 37th, Representative Teasley, to present HB 126.
What's that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you a simple little bill, House Bill 126. As I had a constituent reach out to me and say, Sam, did you realize that it is illegal to have a GPS mounted to your windshield? I said, you've got to be joking. And I remember there was the debate about texting while driving a few years ago, and went back and looked at that code, and there was nothing in there, and so I thought maybe it had gotten covered in that code. So I posed the question to the Legislative Counsel, who generally does a lot of work on public safety issues, and he says, sure enough, in our code, it's an oversight of sorts, but because the code is written the way it is technically illegal to have a GPS mounted to your windshield. I will not admit in front of this committee whether or not I drive illegally every day or not, but in talking with Legislative Counsel, did some research and found in Code Section 40-8-73, which was originally written in 1953 and was last revised in 1982, shall we say, before GPSs were ubiquitous. This code section was written that way. So we've added an exclusion for GPS devices, starting there in lines 15, saying, except as prohibited by federal law, rules, and regulations in the operation of a commercial motor vehicle, a person may drive a motor vehicle with the mount for use in an in-vehicle global positioning or navigation system mounted upon the front windshield, provided that such mount is located on the bottommost portion of the windshield. So when I brought this and asked some people to sign on to it, someone said, please tell me there has not been a rash of tickets going out for people mounting their GPS to their windshields. And thankfully, there has not been. I've heard Representative Kidd mentioned that he had seen a report on the news recently about windshields, but this is completely, the desire here is to make it where people who are currently operating a vehicle feel the freedom to do so and know that they are not breaking the law. Albert Einstein once said, "Nothing is more destructive of respect for the government and the law of the land than passing laws which cannot be enforced." And so the goal here is to make it where people who choose to use GPS devices can do so with a clear conscience.
Representative Teasley, I can see your conscience is throbbing here before us. Chair, I'd like to recognize Representative Kidd.
Thank you. I support this 100%. As I indicated, I saw something on Good Morning America the morning about truckers who drive around the country with dash-mounted GPS systems that are in violation of all state laws. I have a couple of questions. One, does this only apply to commercial motor vehicles, but it also applies to cars? Is that right? Your car, my car?
Yes, the original intent was to make sure it applied to the individual user. There is the language in there provided, however, that except it's provided by federal law, rules, or regulations. There's federal regulation that deals with it as it relates to commercial drivers. I don't know that this makes an exception for commercial drivers.
Well, it looks to me it looks like it says operation of a commercial motor vehicle. A person may drive a motor vehicle. So to me it reads that a commercial motor vehicle can have one, but you and I can't have one. Or am I reading it backwards?
Representative Kidd, I think the commercial motor vehicle is a modifier of the exception, not of the general clause.
My other question is the bottommost portion of the windshield. That's on the top of the dash, in other words.
Right.
Okay.
There was some talk about do we put, and I didn't want to, in a desire to bring a little bit of freedom here, I didn't want to over-regulate exactly what is the bottommost portion of the windshield and say, well, it needs to be 6 inches above because you might have a very slanted windshield. That 6 inches, it's totally unreachable.
Understand? But we're not addressing commercial vehicles, just personal cars.
Where commercial, the exception clause there is where federal law is already speaking to this issue. We are not conflicting with federal law as it relates to commercial vehicles.
Okay.
The primary intention here is to make sure that you as a user, me as a user, and other citizens here can use their GPS devices.
So what is the federal law now? Never mind. Never mind. Never mind. That's okay.
Okay.
I support
you that information.
I support the bill. I support the bill.
I'll get that to you.
And at the proper time.
Chair, I've got a lit up board here, believe it or not. Chair recognizes Representative Dudgeon.
Thank you. Real quick, my wife thanks you. But more and more people are using their phone for their GPS. My wife has a little gizmo where she mounts her phone up there in the corner on the windshield and uses that. I would presume that, and from a common sense interpretation, someone using as a phone as a GPS up there would be all right. Would you think so, Representative?
Mount for use with an in-vehicle global positioning or navigation system.
There you go. I think so, too. My wife thanks you, Representative.
Chair recognizes Representative Oliver.
I don't know what bottommost means,
Okay.
and I don't know how there could be a consistent interpretation of that. I'm happy to vote for your bill, but I think I don't know how to fix it either. I mean, you just had a discussion about how you would fix it, but I think that is unclear as to what bottommost means.
And where that came from, the phrase bottommost, is from looking at, there are a handful of other states that have worked on this issue, I think, Minnesota and Indiana, if I remember correctly. And so legislative council took that term from what the other states have been doing.
I would ask, I guess, just springboarding from the lady's question, is 19 and 20 as a modifier, provided that it's located in the bottommost portion? I would ask parenthetically, is that essential, or do we want to provide liberality that it be mounted anywhere in the windshield?
I don't have a strong feeling about that. It is certainly much more practical that it be on the bottom part of the windshield.
The intent is that it not be obstructive.
Exactly.
So that's the goal of any language you use, is that it doesn't obstruct the view. And that could be the purpose of adding where the windshield meets the dashboard, but I think it's going to be very hard to charge anybody with, if they put it right in the center of the windshield, I think it's going to be hard to charge or enforce this statute.
Right. And I'm certainly open to language that would say that if such mount is located in such a way that does not obstruct the view. I mean, I'm fine with
The challenge is, and the lady could probably elucidate this more than I could, but I mean, the challenge, where this is going to be meaningful is if you have an accident that someone says, hey, I hit this person, I didn't see him because it happened to be mounted in just such a place, they're coming in at just such an angle, and could easily apportion liability. And if they're following the law, then it'd be seen as a blind spot. If it were not, then they could say, hey, you weren't properly following the law, and as a result of that, there might be another inference against them in terms of, the way this could play out civilly or otherwise. To me, I've got my thoughts, but I have. Perhaps we can explore that more later. Chair recognizes Representative Turner.
Actually, my question was much the same as Representative Oliver's. My vehicle, as an example, has a very small windshield, and as a result, oftentimes when I'm turning right around a sharp corner, I have to do some sort of ducking, moving around, kind of lift my head to the left and right to make sure I'm not going to hit somebody that might be walking across the street or whatever. I've found that in my vehicle, if I put it up higher, it's actually better for my specific car. And that was what I was going to kind of piggyback off of Representative Oliver's. If we could take that out, I think, and just say and make a provision saying it's not obstruction, it doesn't obstruct the view of the road for the driver.
I'm certainly open to language that would be
Every car is different, and the obstruction issues in my car deal with the fact that it's a convertible and there's a different construction that creates more blind spots when the top is up. When the top is down, you have no blind spots. But I'm looking at language, mount is located, and I'm not sure this is better. I'm just better than your suggestion, but it located on the lower portion of the windshield to minimize obstruction of the driver's view. But I'm staying with lower and not higher.
Well, again, I think it's vehicle dependent, and if you were to make it sort of more generic, where you said if the law stated so that it's not I'm not saying for the highest part, I'm just saying that it's not obstruction. It's not an obstruction to the driver, so that they can maximize their vision of the road. And so for example, with your vehicle, it might be in a different spot than mine. The bottommost would eat up the windshield in my particular car. I mean, you've seen my car. It's got a very small windshield.
Located on the portion of the windshield to minimize obstruction of the driver's view.
I think
That's the goal.
that's perfect. I think.
It's the goal.
Not on the windshield. I think she said on the windshield, but we're not talking about putting it on the windshield necessarily.
No, actually, this is specifically to deal with
Windshield.
mounting on the windshield.
Not the dash.
It's currently legal to mount it on the dash.
Right.
The whole reason, and I didn't explain this when I started, the whole reason why it is technically illegal to do that on the windshield is because it talks about you can't have anything non-transparent. It says there in line 13 in under current code. You cannot have anything non-transparent material up on the front windshield. Now, why my oil sticker is okay? Maybe we need a bill for oil stickers. I don't know. I hope not. But why that's okay and GPS device, according to legislative council, would not be. That it is specifically making it illegal for windshield.
Chair recognizes Representative Scott. Representative Scott.
Oh. Okay. I agree with Margaret. I just think that we just need to change it where the language will say that does not obstruct the view of the driver, and that would be sufficient because, like they say, every car is different. So I think it just needs to be something that says not to obstruct the view of the driver.
Very minimal to that.
Chair recognizes number 23. Is that Representative Spencer?
At the appropriate time, I'd like to offer an amendment to address this issue.
Okay. If you were to offer an amendment, what would that amendment say?
It would say, starting at line 19, provided that such mount is located striking out on to the end of the sentence to vehicle, it would say such mount is located in a position on the windshield that does not obstruct the view of the driver, period.
Okay. Could you read that for the good of the order?
All right. I will start at line 19, provided that such mount is located in a position on the windshield that does not obstruct the view of the driver, period.
What's your number there, Chuck?
Mr. Chairman, I had a question, but if you entertain, if that's a motion of the gentleman,
Motion. I just asked him to state what his motion would be.
okay, I was just going to ask a question under discussion of his motion, if that was. I guess I also had some verbiage, and not to talk this to death, to the gentleman's language, by definition, anything on the windshield is going to obstruct the view of the driver. I mean, by definition, plain English. I appreciate where the gentleman's trying to go. On my windshield, I have a rearview mirror. That obstructs my vision going forward, but it's placed up there on a high level. So in my case, the car would be higher. To the learned legal minds and to Representative Spencer to entertain, I would suggest perhaps that after located, we'd strike the rest of the sentence, to provide for the least possible obstruction. But again, to leave it to the learned legal minds.
Representative Oliver.
I have a suggestion, and I don't think any of these are necessarily better or worse, but what is clearer, perhaps, is, because I agree with you, to characterize it as obstruction is not really accurate. Because so my suggestion for your consideration, not as a motion, is provided that such mount is located on the windshield to minimize the obstruction of the driver's view. So we have a motion for the bill to pass, Mr. Chairman. I've lost track.
We don't have one. We're still in discussion right now.
Okay.
I want to make sure that if we're formulating motions in our mind, we're clear about what we're going to move on. So, Representative Oliver, could you restate that for staff to make sure we've got it word for word?
Beginning on line 19, provided that such mount is located on the windshield to minimize the obstruction of the driver's view. No, to take out the "the," to minimize obstruction of the driver's view. So I'm eliminating the bottomless portion of, and the remainder of the sentence from on line 19 from to the end of the sentence on 20, and substituting to minimize obstruction of the driver's view.
Yep.
That's my suggestion for consideration, not a motion.
Any further discussion? Okay. We're going to get to a posture where we can entertain a motion here in a moment. Representative Teasley, any further thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I thank you for the committee's time, and certainly I think the feedback has been helpful. I think improved.
Okay. I'm going to, for purposes of getting in a posture to receive amendments, is there a motion on the underlying bill? Got a move to pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. So we've got the bill before us. Are there any amendments that we'd entertain to HB 126? Chair recognizes Representative Oliver.
I wish to amend, beginning on line 19, for the 19 and 20 to read as follows: provided that such mount is located on the windshield to minimize obstruction of the driver's view.
Okay. So we'd be striking on line 19, starting with bottommost through the end of line 20, and inserting windshield to minimize obstruction of the driver's view.
Yeah.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir.
Motion. Have a second? Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment's adopted. Have the bill before us, HB 126, LC 410358, by committee substitute as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of passage HB 126 signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Committee members, appreciate your time. I know some folks came in late. I'd like to welcome folks that came to the committee meeting today. Our next scheduled committee meeting is next Tuesday, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., and agenda will follow. We're adjourned.